So, hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining me on this first call of the new season for Getting in the Groove. What we're hoping to do with these sessions is just get people back into the mood of enjoying running a business, and with the emphasis on enjoying. There hasn't been a lot to enjoy over the last 6 months, except our lovely company, of course, which we've all made the most of. But you know, if we're not in business to enjoy it, then there's not a lot of point. So that's the emphasis that we want to put on this. So as this is the first session in the new season, I've put myself in the hot spot. As much because there aren't a lot of people around at the moment, because you know, they're making the most of the last few days of the holidays before the schools go back. So here I am. Some of you know my history. I've put a lot of it in the links in the session. Sorry, on the web page for this session. So if there's anything you want to know, particularly about what I've done, what I've learned, you know, this kind of things that I've helped other people with, then feel free to ask. And I've got a few questions that people have left in our Slack group as well, which I'll introduce. So who would like to go first? Susie.
This might seem a bit of a cliched question, but what would be the main piece of advice you would give somebody who was starting a business or who's been in business for a while and needs a bit of a kick up the butt to keep them going? What would be the one thing that you would suggest to them?
Okay. Two different questions there. So if somebody was just about to start, I would suggest most earnestly that they had a fallback plan. Specifically some savings, a cushion, because it always takes longer to get a business to revenue than people think it's going to. And just setting out thinking that, you know, next month or in 2 months, 3 months time, you can replace a salary is very, very optimistic indeed. Most people need a lot longer than that. So I would always advise working out exactly when your revenue is about to come in, how much investment you need to make in the business for that to happen, and make sure you have that money to hand before you start. Otherwise, you're always playing catch up. You're on this horrible hamster wheel where you never really have enough money to invest back in the business. So you're just taking out everything that you earn, and there's no money left to grow. And the thing that keeps most businesses small is that they just don't earn enough to put anything into the business to help it to grow. If you've got to the point where you've been in business for a while and you're just kind of treading water and thinking, you know, what do I need to do this to get on with this? I would suggest revisiting the reasons why you started the business in the first place. You know, what was that dream? What was it that made you take that leap of faith? Because it's a scary thing, you know, getting out of employment, which most people do in order to start a business. It's frightening, and you have to have something that's driving you to do that. So I'd suggest revisiting that original goal. And if that's no longer relevant, then ask yourself, you know, why are you still doing this? What is it that you want to get out of it? But there has to be a goal. There has to be a reason for doing it, other than just, you know, because you've just got comfortable. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Anne-Marie?
Have there been any businesses that you've seen that have particularly surprised you that they've either succeeded or not?
When you say or not, do you mean that have surprised me because they failed?
Because they failed, yeah.
Okay. Oh, a lot in the latter category. You know, more businesses, I think it's something like 85% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. So there are huge numbers that don't make it. And usually it's for the reasons that I said. They run out of money. So it doesn't matter how good the idea is, how good the product is, how good the service is, how brilliant people are. If they haven't got that plan in place to make the revenue and really start to make things work within that first 5 years, they are likely to run out of money. And that is the biggest reason for all small businesses going out of business. So not a lot of surprises at that end. And lots and lots of surprises at the other end. You know, I mean, there is no rhyme or reason to what will work and what won't, except that it has to be something that people want and are willing to pay for. I get loads of people coming to me saying, I've got this great idea. And when you look into it, they think it's a great idea, but nobody else does. Nobody actually is prepared to pay for whatever it is that they want to produce. And until you test that out, it's sometimes difficult to know that that is the case. So always doing the market research, always doing that little bit of testing to see if people will pay an amount of money that will enable you to make a profit is the biggest thing.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, my question is a Cambridge-based question, because you've been doing this sort of thing for a while in Cambridge. And I'm just wondering, in your view, what's missing? So lots of people obviously talk to you about their businesses all the time. And do you see any trends where you see like huge gaps of, you know, why isn't this need or constant request being fulfilled by anyone?
That's a difficult one because, yeah, one of the things that I'm always being asked is about admin help. You know, nobody goes into business to do their own admin. So I'm often being asked for recommendations to VAs and admin people and things like that. And that's nearly all of the VAs that I know are really, really busy. They're all overbooked. The other thing that comes to mind is when we had a talk by David Cleaveley, who runs the Raspberry Pi Foundation and has started about 18 different businesses in Cambridge. And one of the things he pointed out is that there's lots and lots of great ideas come out of the universities. And again, they go back to this idea that I was telling Anne-Marie about, that they think it's a great idea. You know, they've dreamt up this amazing thing, but they haven't tested it out to see if anybody would pay for it. And instead of getting local people involved in doing that market research and stuff, they tend to go to agencies in London for some reason. So somehow trying to get local suppliers together with what comes out of the university in Cambridge, I think is a missing link. We could be doing that a lot better, but I don't know exactly how we would do that. You know, there are lots of different agencies, but they don't seem to work together.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Lawrence.
Yeah, back on that. You know that Prue and I were trying to interest David Cleaveley and Andrew Hatcher and some of the other people who mentor small businesses. We were trying to interest them in the market research workshop that we were giving to show companies how they can, you know, do the exact kind of market research you were just talking about. Did we approach them incorrectly about that? Did we not express the value well enough?
I think that's probably a very specific question that we might go into outside.
Let's park that one, Anne.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're right that they tend to go to these London agencies, and because they don't know what questions to ask, they're asking these agencies to do what Prue calls boiling the ocean, rather than guiding, understanding the process so that they can, so that they don't spend tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
But okay, let's park that. But I'm interested to hear your answer about the market research angle, and we'll the three of us will talk about it later.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's okay. I mean, for those of you who aren't Cambridge based, an awful lot of the infrastructure around small businesses is in supplying the universities with various services. Whether that's training or marketing, or not so much marketing. But all kinds of different things small businesses get involved in, but it's piecemeal. There's no real rhyme or reason or system to it. It seems to be, you know, who you know, who can introduce you to people who are looking for something, which is kind of how business always works anyway, really. But yeah, but there is a huge amount of money and effort tied up in supplying the universities. Any other questions? Okay, one of the ones that I got from the group was the top things that small businesses get wrong, and I think I've probably covered that. I think a lot of it is to do with not pricing your services in high enough to make sure that you've got money left over to put back into the business to expand it. You know, to hire people to do the jobs that you don't need to do, that leave you to do the stuff that actually earns the money and the stuff that you enjoy. So I would always recommend, most small businesses price their services much too low. You could go in a lot higher, and if you've got the quality there, you'll still get the work if you've got recommendations and testimonials and things. So I'd always think about, you know, you need the money for you need the money for the business, and you need the money to pay suppliers. It's not just how much money you personally can earn out of the business. There's always the other side to it as well, and I think that's what a lot of small businesses don't take into account, and that's why they stay small. Another question was about how to navigate the uncertainty. I don't know whether I'm sort of expected to be some kind of oracle here, and I guess I have navigated several recessions already. But my answer to that really is that there is never any certainty. You know, even in the years that we think things are reasonably stable, anything can happen. You know, Julian's a great example of that. Julian has been through the wars and back. You know.
Yeah, I volunteered for all those.
I think he personally has helped the NHS test more drugs than, than most people. So you can never tell. You know, you're bowling along, having a great time, everything's fine, and something happens, and you can never ever legislate for that. And it may be a global pandemic, it may be something purely personal, but whatever it is, you can never be certain of the future. So all you can do is try and have some kind of cushion, some kind of fallback plan, some kind of insurance that will help you through the bad times. And you know, the people who did have a nest egg when all this lockdown and stuff happened in February, you know, they were the ones who were able to see more clearly a way through what was going to happen, and didn't just, you know, have to go into a panic mode and wait to see what the government were going to offer them. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is to always have some kind of cushion if you possibly can, whether that's insurance or a pension plan or you know, private medical insurance, whatever it is. Try and have something, and I know that's easy to say and not so easy to do, especially if you've never had the chance to actually earn a lot of money, or if you've had other calls on your personal money. But that's the biggest way to navigate any kind of uncertainty, really.
Go ahead, Julian.
Thanks, Lawrence. No, I was just, in the current context, my reading of it, it seems to be very much a different situation to previous recessions and so on. My sense is that the scale of the shock to everyone in the world, really, there's going to have massive ripple effect doesn't do it justice, which is going to continue for quite some time. So
tsunami effect.
Yes, yeah, but yeah, several. Yeah, I think there are going to be quite a few shocks that come to us that we haven't anticipated yet, as this whole thing runs its course. Yes, having a nest egg is a useful thing, but I think we probably need to broaden our thinking as well in terms of adapting. It is a word that's being much used now, to cope with that level of change that will continue for probably a handful of years, I would guess.
Yeah, and call me perverse, but I find that really exciting.
Yes.
Yes.
When you think back to the tsunami in Japan, you know, where whole populations were wiped out, where people survived and found that everything they owned and everybody they knew had gone. Those people survived, and they not only survived, but they were so strong as a result of that, and came up with so many amazing things that they helped other people with. That it was absolutely, I mean, the human spirit and human endurance is extraordinary.
Yes.
Whatever we go through, and when we go through something as a community, as a group of people, and we can come together and help each other through it, that makes it even better. It makes it even stronger. And you just have to look around at what happened. You know, the Black Lives Matter campaign, that came up again because of the pandemic. All the stuff about disability and people working from home who had never been allowed to work from home before, who'd always been refused that privilege, are now saying we can do it. You know, we've proved we can do it. All kinds of things about getting young people into work. Young people don't need a degree to go into marketing. You know, and all of these questions are being asked, barriers are being broken down. And we're saying you know, to survive, we have to bring people in who have talent. And that talent doesn't depend on education. It doesn't depend on race, culture, ability, physical ability, or anything. You know, it's spread across the whole of the population. And we now have a chance, with some of these barriers being broken down, we have a chance to bring that in.
Yes, we've got to work out ways to find that talent, or allow ourselves to find that talent as well. And stop thinking about, you know, all this stuff we've been fed, that you have to go on a certain path in order to achieve something. Yes.
So I find that really exciting. And I can see in little pockets things are happening, and if we can bring those together, it would be great. Really good.
Yeah.
And I have a follow-on from the original question and your answer. In addition to myself, a couple of our current clients, because of the situation, are finding themselves pivoting their business. Okay. Now, when you pivot your business, do you have to go back to square one, proving your validity and your value, or can you capitalize on your past, what you were known for in the past?
The businesses that I know of that have done that have relied very heavily on the reputation of the business owner or founder. And it's that personal reputation that's carried them through. So it's a case of, if you could do it this way, we trust you to do it that way. Yep. And it's all about trust. As so much of business is, you know, if there is no trust, it's very rarely a sale, especially in a service business.
Right.
So you know, when you think of you know, the fantastic example we had in Cambridge of Neil Baradwar and the Cambridge Fruit Company, his business disappeared overnight when people shut their offices.
Right.
And he took to Twitter in tears saying, you know, it's gone.
Yeah.
15 years worth of work, it's gone. And everybody said, hey, we're sitting at home and we need fruit and veg. Bring some to us. And he has a whole new business, and he'll never go back to what he was doing before, I'm sure.
Right. And it's based on his loyal clientele and his Cambridge reputation.
Yeah. And the other great example was Mark Anstead, who runs the Cambridge Wine Company. He was doing wine tastings, bringing people into a room in a hotel and doing a sort of, like a wine school session. And again, he came on one of our calls very early on and said, "What do I do now?"
Yeah.
And how could this possibly work online? And he got loads of help. And he now runs wine tasting sessions online that are better, much, much, much better than anything he did before, because he's linked Zoom to Google Earth. So he can take his clients on a tour of the vineyard. He can get them to meet the growers, talk to the growers, in person, on screen, and they still have their wine delivered and can taste it and have a great time. So that added a whole extra dimension to his business that he would never have thought of before.
I was wondering a little bit at the idea of having virtual wine tasting, but as you described, the wider context that he's opened up.
Yeah.
Well, that's very helpful. That's very helpful, Prue, for what we were talking about just before this call.
I'm actually making a note. Mark Anstead. I was going to say it's the name Anstead.
Yeah. That's great.
Is the surname Anstead?
Yes, Anstead.
Thank you.
So yeah. Any other questions? Sorry, I get carried away with this stuff once I get going. Any other questions? Okay, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about today, because one of the questions people often ask me is, what is the thing that most people who have made a success of business have in common? And of all the people that I've interviewed over the years, it comes down to one thing, and that's fear. What they have is a lack of fear. They're for all sorts of different reasons. It may be because they were from a wealthier background, so whatever they, think about Bill Gates, he dropped out of school, but there was no real danger there that he was ever going to starve. So he just tried whatever he wanted to do, and he was able to make it work. He didn't need to continue with university and all the rest of it. He already had all the things he needed, and that applies to a lot of people. So if you have that background of security, you can risk things that other people may not, and that's a great position to be in. But other people come at it from the completely opposite end. There was a fantastic interview with Jeff Bezos the other month when he was giving his testimony to the antitrust hearings in the States. Where he said that he was from, this is the wealthiest man in the world right now. He came from an immigrant family. He was born when his mother was 14 years old, in a very, very, very poor background. And for him, he had nothing to lose. He just ploughed on and did what he had to do, because it couldn't get any worse than where he'd come from. And I've interviewed a lot of people who've been in that position. There's a guy locally called Michael Markham, who for many, many years has run Stanair Industrial Doors in Peterborough. When Michael was a young man, he was brought up in a Barnardo's boys' home and got into trouble with the police very early on in his life. And eventually was told by the judge that he could either make the choice of going into the army or going to an adult prison. So a few years later, he had learned some engineering skills from his years in the army and got a job at Stanair Industrial Doors, and was making good progress there. And then that company went bust, and he was in danger of losing his job. And I'm not sure how many people worked there at the time, about 150 or so. He had no experience at all of running a business, but he decided he liked this business and he didn't want to give it up. So he got some people together and they saved the business, and he ran it for years and years and years and made it very successful. And not only that, but he spent an awful lot of his time running charity races to make money for boys' homes, to give back some of the things that he'd learned. And when I interviewed him and I said, you know, what made you decide that you were the one to save the company? And he said, I had nothing to lose. You know, it's as simple as that. And so I always say to people, you know, what would you do if you absolutely knew that you couldn't fail? Right now in your business, if you knew whatever you tried couldn't fail, what would you do in your business right now? And then think about what's stopping you. Sorry, Lawrence.
No, that's great. That you reminded me of, I started life in acting conservatory, and one of our teachers said, your style comes from what you can't do. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if we turn that on its head, your specialty, in other words, if we stop thinking about all the things we can't do and we focus on the one thing that we know we do better than everyone else.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Rob Burney, who figured on, and who's been very frank about this with our group, that, you know, early on in life, he figured out he was basically unemployable. And he, at a young age, which is really admirable, he figured out that he was going to have to find a way to work from home, doing something he loved, and basically managing his expectations around taking care of his mental health. Okay. And as I've told you, I find that extremely inspiring, because most of us spend a lot of time trying to do the things that we think we're expected to do. And it's possible that that's, you know, that instead of beating ourselves up all during our careers about the things that we're not capable of doing, we, in my case, particularly wasting time on an industry that I wasn't particularly interested in, okay, because it paid the most and I had, you know, I had massive financial family responsibilities. So what you said just reminded me of that, you know, your style comes from what you can't do. Don't waste time on what you can't do. Focus on what makes you unique. Something about that. I'm not sure. Can you, do you have a response to that, Anne?
I think focusing on what makes you unique is something that a lot of small businesses underestimate or dismiss. You know, it is very much a personal relationship that we have with most of our clients. You know, I mean, it's a cliche to say that people buy people, but they really do.
Yeah.
And in a small business, that person is usually you, because you haven't got a salesperson out there representing you. You know, it's you that people are looking to. And I think building that relationship and that trust. But always, yes, it's this business of, I mean, again, being authentic. It's become a bit of a cliche, but I think it's about being you, and not trying to be some kind of model or shoehorn yourself into something that people expect a business owner to look like or behave like. And Rob would be the first one to say that, you know, he spends most of his time messing about, making jokes, making people laugh. Rather than, you know, promoting his business or trying to be serious about it. But that's what attracts people to him. Yeah.
I see Susie responding. Was it something specific about your business, Susie, that
No, it's just what Anne was saying about Rob. It's the whole thing about, you feel like, you know, he's there messing about, but actually he's messing about. It's him doing what he does best. It's him doing his work. And it just reminded me of that video that he put together for the bank holiday, which is just so him, but it was just so spot on. And it just made me, I was crying with laughter. It was so funny. But the way that he'd taken all the different, you know, how people react and do, this is how they're going to, they post on different social media what they're doing over the bank holiday weekend, and it was just spot on. He just just captured everything that makes you cringe about all those all those platforms. So they go, oh, did I ever the post?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know Rob, he produces videos, to promote different products and things, and we'd been having this conversation about all the awful cliches that people use about bank holidays, like Friday, and we would, because it was a bank holiday, we were saying Monday, all this nonsense, and using hashtags. And he made up these personas and put them all together in a video, as though it was an Instagram post, a LinkedIn post, and various other things, and just the very worst of all these cliches put together. And it was absolutely hilarious.
Did I not see this because I'm not following Rob on LinkedIn? Where did he put it? Where did he post
it? It was on Twitter.
Friday checkout, wasn't it?
It was on Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go back.
It's worth it, Lawrence.
Thank you.
It's really good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Let me tell you a couple of more inspiring stories then, of people that I've interviewed and people that have made a big impression on me. So one of my all-time heroes is Dame Stephanie Shirley. I don't know if any of you have heard of her.
Yes. Yeah.
So she came over to this country. She escaped the Nazi Jewish intern camps when she was 5 years old. She came over here. And in 1962, she set up a business called Freelance Programmers in 1962. And she employed women exclusively, mostly women who had small children and needed to work from home. And she built this amazing empire before she was forced 20 years later or so to make these positions available to men as well during the Equal Opportunities legislation, which is a complete turnaround to all the stuff that I was involved in at the time. And she is just the most amazing person. She's done a fantastic TED talk called Why Women Have Flat Heads. And it's because we're always being patronized, patted on the head. She is extraordinary, and she's given away more money than anybody else. She's the only person to have come off the Sunday Times rich list because she's given money away. She's quite extraordinary. So if you want someone inspiring to look up to, have a look at her. Bringing it closer to home, there's a couple of other people that always stick in my mind. One is Muhammad al-Bawadli, who started a business called Patients Know Best. And he is a physician, and he has a number of very complicated medical conditions, and discovered that when he was talking to various physicians, he was the only one who knew his full story. He was always having to fill in the story for the specialists, as you know. And because he's a really, really clever guy, he came up with this idea of putting patients' records together so that they owned them, they had access to them, and they could take them with them when they went for various treatments. That grew into the most incredible business that can now predict where various outcomes of different diseases are likely to happen. In which health authority in the UK, so that people can be prepared for them. So they now use the data, anonymous data, but they use data to feed into the health service and into health services, and people who are making drugs and all kinds of things like that. It's a very, very big business now. But all started out of something that he found he needed for himself. And I can still remember when he came into the studio of the radio show that I was doing, he immediately started fiddling with all the knobs and things on the desk. He was desperate to know how everything works. You know, I can still see him sort of moving all the levers and faders and things and asking me what things did. But he's an amazing guy. His Twitter name is Idiopathic. Definitely worth following and worth looking at. I'll put some notes about these people in the show notes. The other one is a guy called Faisal Rahman, who started a company called Fair Finance. Faisal tells this story, this is his words, not mine. He tells this story about him being at home with his parents and being quite dismissive of his mother and sisters who were serving dinner. And the guest that they had for dinner was a director of the Grameen Bank that was started in Bangladesh to microfinance women's projects in villages. And this chap took Faisal to one side and gave him a good telling off and told him that if he wanted to find out what women were really worth, he should come and find out, work in the bank and see what some of these women were producing in their villages. The result of that was that Faisal realised that there were an awful lot of people completely disenfranchised who didn't have access to any kind of loans or finance at all. And so he nearly got arrested actually because he helped a woman I think he loaned her some money, or he found someone willing to loan her some money so that she could buy a headstone for her husband. And that in itself was illegal because he wasn't a registered moneylender. So he set up the company called Fair Finance so that people who have no fixed abode, who don't have access to other funds, could borrow money. And what he discovered was that almost all of these people are a good risk. If they're given a chance to pay the money back, they will pay it back. They want to pay it back, but they have to have it available to them in the first place. And again, he's been going for 15 years or more. He took on the likes of Wonga and payday loan companies and things like that, and helped to make them, to get legislation that stopped them from ripping people off. And he just is the most extraordinary man. He's absolutely fantastic. So there are people out there who just started with an idea, a small idea, and have, I don't know, the luck comes into this a lot. You know, the people that you meet, being in the right place at the right time, having access to some finance or some help, but you know, people do create extraordinary things from nothing, from an idea, and end up making the world a better place. And I think that's what excites me so much about business. You know, that there is the capacity there to make things better, and to create things that not just employ people, but actually do provide things, services, and inspiration and all kinds of things.
Yeah. Surely it's those kind of organizations, those kind of inspirations that are going to make a difference as we go through these this ripple of tsunamis that we've got coming through.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, if those people are around then doing that kind of thing 15, 20 years ago, there are lots of them available now if we can just make sure they get a chance.
I have a question. With all of your background, Anne, why drive? Sorry, made you laugh.
That's okay. We were just been talking about that on Twitter, because tomorrow we have the first of our networking events, proper networking events online. And the reason I started Drive is that I realised that most small businesses need to be networking. You know, you need to go to networking events to meet people in order to grow your business. And right from the very first one I went to, I hated it because people were so false.
Yeah.
You know, they have this horrible elevator pitch, you know, that is, it's never about the person they're talking to. to me, that's not, you can't tell people what you do unless you know what they're interested in.
Exactly.
So you have to start with questions, not with a statement.
Yeah.
And the whole process of it. I mean, Karen Arnott calls it business cards at dawn, and that's kind of what it's like, you know, or was like anyway. And I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. So I've always kind of done my own thing when it came to networking.
Right.
I used to have a group called the Inspired Group. We had inspirational speakers every month. And I ran that for 10 years, one event every month for 10 years. That's going some. Finding speakers and getting 60, 70, sometimes 80 or more people in a room together, and that was fabulous. It was wonderful, but exhausting. And I gave that up in 2015. And said I've had enough. And then people kept saying to me, "Oh, we really miss this. We really miss this. We really miss this." So I decided to do something different, and that's where Drive was born. Because I said, I'm quite happy to carry on doing this, but I need other people to do it, to actually run the events. And that's what Drive was born from. It's turned into something completely different over the 4 years since we started it. But essentially it is about people networking by being themselves and not having to put on a game face and not having to pretend that everything, we used to have this joke about, I'm just about to sign this contract with, this blue chip company, and their CEO is flying in next week and we're meeting at this hotel. And it was all such bullshit. People would tell you these stories and nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
There's this sort of humble boasting, humble brag that you get about all the marvelous things that people were just about to do, and it was all nonsense most of the time, anyway. Paul.
Yes, and well, everyone now in Drive anyway, or roughly what they do. What would you say we are all doing right and we are all doing wrong?
What you're all doing right is building great relationships. Those relationships, the strengths of those relationships is what carries most businesses forward, because it's the trust that's built through that encourages people to recommend you to their friends and into their networks. Because I usually describe this by saying every one of us is standing in a group of at least 150 people. If you look up Dunbar's number, this is it's the number of people that we can maintain a social relationship with. You remember people's names, you kind of remember where they're about, where they are and what they're doing and that kind of thing. Obviously some more than others, but and if you think of the 6 people who are on the screen, the 9 people who are on the screen at the moment, if they're each connected to 150 people, some of those will overlap, but a lot of them won't. So imagine, just by being in this group now, how many people you have access to. If somebody likes you and decides to promote you, decides to help you by pushing you into their group, taking your, what you do and offering it to the people that they know, that is just so strong. And it's stronger by far than any group that only has one lawyer, one graphic designer, one florist, one web designer, who are all expected to do business with each other, regardless of whether they like each other and trust each other. That has always struck me as completely nonsensical.
Yeah, they have this thing in the United States called the Rotary Club. Do we have that over here as well?
Yeah.
Okay, one of each.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's completely crazy. Also, you never understand the uniqueness of what you do unless you've got colleagues who do the same thing that you do.
Yeah.
I mean, but my question, and I'm playing devil's advocate, Anne, is there not the limitation, I won't say the danger because it's obviously wonderful, but is there not the limitation in Drive that we just end up serving each other? Because I was just looking at the people on this screen And Prue and I are partners. Susie's done some work for us. Anne-Marie's just done some work for me. And I'm doing some work at the moment for Linda. Okay. So
yes, but I understand exactly what you're saying. But what often the people in the network are not aware of is what goes on outside of the network.
yes, okay.
So I know because people talk to me,
Right.
you know, sort of offline, if you like. But the number of people who get recommended into a big company, or into a different industry, or you know, into people who are not connected to Drive is big.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of that goes on as well, and that's the beauty of it, really.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That was
I can vouch for that. Tanya's introduced me to a whole pool of people who I can't imagine any other reality in which we would be introduced to each other and end up doing business together.
Yeah, you only have to think about who you know, who other people's clients are. You know, Dan Ince works with huge brands.
Yeah.
The you know, the Wine Society, Jordan Cereals, all of that kind of stuff.
right.
Andy Boothman's the same. He you know, works in very, very big brands. Louise Lee, who hasn't been around lately because she's busy moving house and all the rest of it, she works with much bigger companies and is constantly bringing people in to do jobs. So yeah, there's an awful lot of opportunities there, but you have to get to know people first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thanks
So,
for that. You know, I was just basically.
Oh yeah. And again, because we don't measure that, we don't ask people to come back and tell us, you know, what's the value of the sales you've recommended this month. Because we don't do that, it's not as obvious as in some other organisations.
Thank you.
So to go back to the second part of your question, Paul, what people are doing wrong, I think mostly playing small. You know, I think that most of the people in our network are capable of doing much, much more than they are doing. They've found their comfort zone, and as Helen once famously said, it's taken me 20 years to find my comfort zone, and I'm not leaving it anytime soon. And if that's what people want to do, that's fine. You know, but that's not running a business, that's owning a job. And you know, if your idea is to create a job for yourself where you're your own boss and you have a nice quiet life, there's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, but that's what you've got. And I get frustrated because I can see so much talent that is not being pushed to its limit. And you know, I can see there are businesses in Drive that could be a lot bigger. And that requires people to either step back from what they're actually doing and decide to run the business, or to bring someone in to run the business so that they can do the thing they like doing, whether that's, you know, designing or gardening or whatever. So yeah, but there are there's lots of opportunities to grow much bigger businesses than a lot of people are taking.
And a big element of that, Anne, is being able to engage the various talents that you have at your disposal, including professional services and all the other services on that. But breaking down, I mean, several of us, we're just relying on the quality of the work that you are able to produce and hope that the word will go around and somebody will come around and do that. But breaking down that barrier to get people to engage people who know better about various aspects, not just legal. Everyone here is here because they have some particular skills and, you know, that they provide, and they are doing well because they are successful in that. But so from what Lawrence was saying earlier, was probably positive in a way that we're engaging each other because we know those talents. But I think having a structured way to actually get people to engage professional services so that they can grow. It's, I don't know, maybe something for another day, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely worth talking about. I think that's a good idea. Okay, we're almost at the hour. So any last questions or comments before we sign off for today? Nope.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's lovely to be starting to be in contact with a network again.
That's great. Well, we look forward to seeing some more of you then, Julian.
Yeah, good to have you, Julian.
That would be
Thanks,
great.
Lawrence.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining in, for being so enthusiastic and being a sea of smiling faces while I talk about the things that I like talking about. I feel very self-indulgent. So we'll be back next week with another workshop and lots more activity going on in the main term. But for now, thank you very much.